Welcome to Listening First, the podcast on rehabilitation and recovery. Welcome to our first ever episode. I'm Patrick Boyd.
And I'm Ben Marram. And in this podcast, we're hoping to essentially just introduce what this is all about, how it came to be, and what our hopes are for the podcast.
So this has been a project that we've been talking about for quite a while now, maybe 4 or 5 months. And it's only just now that we've got around to recording and releasing a number of episodes, which we're really excited to release to everyone. So before we go on to talk about the podcast in itself, Ben, I think we should probably introduce ourselves a little bit more to our listeners so they understand who we are and why we've arrived at the point of releasing a podcast on rehabilitation and recovery. So, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. So I'm Ben Marram. I'm a neuropsychologist. I've been qualified as a psychologist since 2015, and I've worked in sort of neurological rehabilitation and rehabilitation more broadly since around 2014, although well before that I was a support worker in brain injury, so I've always kind of been around the sort of rehabilitation space. I was working in the NHS up until December 2024, and then I left the NHS and I work fully independently now, but I'm mainly known for being an associate with Clarity Psychology, who are a provider of psychological services across the northeast and beyond, actually, because we get to some amazing places up and down the country. So my work involves a lot of direct treatment, so helping people as part of their recovery and rehabilitation in a treatment role, typically as part of a medical legal process. I've also started doing some expert witness work, and I also work with a charity called the Lilly Foundation, which is helping adults and families affected by a rare condition called mitochondrial disease. So I've got a really varied and active role. I'm here, there and everywhere. And it's just amazing to do something like this where we're speaking to people who I get to work with, luckily, every day. Some people I don't get to work with, but I look forward to working with, or who have a special interest like me in areas of rehabilitation, really. So yeah, so we're lucky enough to work together, Patrick, aren't we, on occasion?
Yep.
And yeah, so that's kind of a bit about me, really, and it'd be great to hear a bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm a case manager. So I run a case management company with 2 other business partners called BPJ Case Management. I was a social worker before I moved into case management. And for those who don't know, a case manager is essentially somebody who is a project manager for people's rehabilitation. So we don't offer treatment as such, but we do oversee and manage a team of professionals who provide hands-on treatment to people going through independent rehabilitation packages following serious injuries. So I qualified as a social worker in 2015. Prior to that, I worked as an unqualified social work assistant in local authorities and various different roles, but all kind of working with people in need of various types of care and support. But I got to a point working in local authority where I felt like I needed a new challenge. And so I moved into brain injury. I was very lucky to get an opportunity just by chance. Many of these things happen by chance, don't they, rather than by design. And I got an opportunity to move into case management, grasped it with both hands, and I've been a case manager now for 9 years. I can't imagine myself doing anything else, to be honest. So aside my case management role, I'm also the trustee of a number of charities, one of those being a Headway group, Headway Teesside, and I'm also a trustee for the Brain Injury Social Work Group, which is a really fantastic professional interest group where we share knowledge and information about brain injury and recovery, and particularly helping social workers to understand how they can best help people with acquired neurological conditions. I'm also a visiting lecturer at a local university, and I thoroughly enjoy my work supporting students to qualify as social workers. And I'd like to think that in my own very small way, I'm having an impact on the types of social workers that are going to be coming into contact with our general population in the future, a better informed cohort of social workers. That's what I really hope to achieve. So yeah, that's me really. So we've got a social worker and a neuropsychologist, and I think between us we've got a fair amount of knowledge. But I think that the key is that we don't have all of the knowledge, Ben. That's kind of why we've set this podcast up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting. It's worthwhile maybe setting the scene for listeners. Hopefully they care. Was that you kind of rang me up and said, "Listen, Ben, I've got an idea. We often share interests," and you were like, "I've got an idea of doing a podcast." And I think probably because of the way we are, Patrick, we started talking about all the things that it could be, and what struck us was exactly what you were saying there, which is just getting to meet so many interesting people or do such interesting work. Forever feeling like we're learning new stuff or learning from people, and trying to get that out there and sharing it with others. Typically, if we share, if we're at a conference together or if we're at a networking event or whatever it might be, or even if we're just chatting, if we've met in the pub about something that's super interesting, it just felt helpful maybe that we could share that with others. Do you think that's a fair summary of what we got to?
Totally, yeah. It's these kinds of conversations, the informal conversations where we share knowledge and experiences without it being a super formal exchange. I think they can be so valuable, because I think as professionals, we can sometimes feel the pressure to have all of the answers to some of the questions that we're asked. And it's actually not realistic for us to have all of those answers, and we need to listen to other people, and we need to have open minds and be prepared to take on different perspectives. And I think that kind of underpins the title of the podcast, doesn't it? The Listening First podcast. This is not about us talking about everything we know. It's actually an acknowledgement that we don't know everything and that there's so much for us to learn. One of the things that I said to you, Ben, when we first talked about the idea was about how we all get the opportunity to go to conferences from time to time. Some of us get more opportunities than others. And at these conferences, we get to listen to some eminent and really, really interesting people talking about things that they're super passionate about, whether that be a new piece of research or a new treatment modality or a lived experience even. And it's really interesting for the people in the room at the time at that conference, but it can only contain so many hundred people, and there's so many other people who would like to be at the conference but can't make it, and who would really benefit from listening to these stories and to these presentations. And so for me, hosting a podcast like this allows us to kind of bring those types of discussions to the people who can't necessarily make it to conferences and can't benefit from those kind of insights. So people being able to pick up the phone and log into a podcast app and just listen at their own convenience. It's just such a exciting opportunity, I think.
Yeah, and I guess because we agreed this early on that we kind of come at it from a position of not knowing, because what that helps hopefully for listeners is that it's not that each episode then is you have to have a sort of an interest in it or it's part of your knowledge base. You can essentially come to it from any profession and hopefully get something out of it. If anything, that's part of what we're trying to achieve, is to have really open conversations with people, mostly free from jargon, to kind of go, right, what is this all about? What are some of the hot topics? What's the recent innovation? Just stuff where we can have detailed conversations from a position of not knowing. So even if it is, for example, a neuropsychologist, it's like, okay, well, just don't assume knowledge because I'm also a neuropsychologist. Really chat us through what that might mean for people who are very, very new to this. And I think for that reason, then hopefully it has appeal to people who are, just starting their careers in rehabilitation, whether that's as a support worker or a rehabilitation assistant, all the way to people who are, established expert witnesses who've had lots of experience in rehabilitation. I think it fits with that kind of idea of lifelong learning. And I suppose that concept of reverse mentoring, you're kind of the people who are most experienced learning from the people who are most new to the field and the ideas that they're bringing. And I think a podcast format suits that agenda really well for the reasons you said. It's something you can put on in the car. It's something you can do when you're cooking, when you're going on a walk. And I hope then it's not too heavy, that it's engaging and accessible. That kind of hopefully sets a scene on what we're trying to achieve.
One of the things that we've decided on the podcast is to keep our episodes relatively short, so you won't be getting episodes longer than 45 minutes to an hour, because there's so much that we can talk about, but we do need to keep it brief. So we'll be very focused on specific topics, and hopefully that will be appealing to listeners as well. We were talking about the kind of appeal of doing the podcast and building a body of content for people to draw upon, almost like a knowledge base as well. I really love that idea that this could be something that people could come back to and refer back to in the future. Or as case managers, speaking particularly for my own profession, it isn't our job to have all of the answers. It's our job to know who to go to and where to get the answers. One saying that really stuck with me was from a really valued case management colleague who said it's not the job of the case manager to know things, it's the job of the case manager to collect people who know things. And that is exactly what this podcast is setting out to do. It's a collection of people who know things, who share things, and who hopefully can also gain knowledge as well. And that's certainly what I intend to do here. I want to learn as well as contribute.
Yeah, and I think maybe based on what you said there and reiterate my point from earlier, this isn't a podcast for case managers or neuropsychologists. It's hopefully a podcast for every discipline, including, I think it's fair to say, some disciplines that often aren't first thought of in rehabilitation, so whether that's music therapists or rehabilitation assistants. It should really be accessible for everybody. And I'm really excited, actually. I know we're going to talk a little bit later on about maybe teasing who we've already recorded and who's already coming on. But I think already based on who we've had on, I can't wait for people to hear that information and to get something from it as well, because there's just a lot to take away. And I guess as well, is it worthwhile saying, Patrick, that we're both Northeast lads? And I guess, we get on, and hopefully there's an element of that warmth that comes through in the general conversation as well.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of the podcast was basically a product of us sitting in the pub over a pint and just chatting about life in general, and the trials and tribulations and the highs and the lows of being a professional, but also we're both dads as well. We've both got our own families. We're both juggling so many things, and we're not alone in that. I think everybody who listens to this podcast will have their own version of that. And it's an acknowledgement, really, that we're human beings and we don't have all of the answers. We're not infallible. But what we can do is share knowledge and support each other to be better versions of ourselves, both personally and professionally.
And I think with that then comes, I'd like to say, Patrick, maybe a sort of a humble, we don't have huge ambitions per se for the podcast. It doesn't have to reach a certain milestone, but we'd like it to be really successful. And part of that then is making sure as well that we're maybe getting our listeners to contribute, to think about ideas, questions, guests, certain areas of innovation, certain interesting conversations that maybe they've had at a conference that they think that would be worthwhile sharing. It doesn't just have to be with one guest, it could be with a group of guests. I think the young people call this content, Patrick.
Yeah.
That the content is fresh. And
are we allowed to refer to ourselves as young people? I don't think so. I don't think that's permissible, is it?
No, not anymore. But I think it's about that kind of the freshness. That's what podcasts are about. It's about the freshness, the current issues, the current challenges in rehabilitation, that we hope then will be super engaging for people.
Yeah, and the development of a community, it's an exchange of information. And I think as well as having professionals on to speak, I'm really interested in the idea of having people with lived experience of recovery and rehabilitation to come and speak to us, because, we sometimes refer to professionals as experts when, the real experts are the people who've actually lived and breathed it. And we can't profess to have a conversation about rehabilitation and recovery without including those voices. So, again, any listeners, if any listeners know people with lived experience who would be happy to contribute and speak to us, then we'd be super excited to consider that with them and try and find a way of making it work.
Yeah, I guess as well that might even form part of someone's therapeutic goals at the time, that part of what they would like to do is share their story via like a podcast format. I think that sounds awesome, Patrick. I think it's exactly what this is about. And as you said, it's about experts by experience, including families who've lived often incredibly challenging situations. So
in terms of the episodes to come, then I suppose we should probably tease our listeners a little bit with what we've got to come. So we've recorded a couple of episodes already. One of those is with an eminent figure within the brain injury rehabilitation and case management world. And that person has spoken to us about rehabilitation in itself and poses some really interesting questions, which I think listeners will find very intriguing and quite searching.
Yeah, I mean, I should say both these guests we could have easily filled 3 hours plus, and we'll probably have them back because I think we were a bit like, actually, is 45 minutes enough? But we've stuck to the format, and I think that's the right thing to do. But yeah, so really excited for that first guest. And now our second guest is a really experienced therapist who's talking about the benefits of therapeutic groups and sort of peer support in rehabilitation and their experience of doing that, which again, we could have filled easily 3 hours on that topic, Patrick. I kind of felt bad stopping that conversation.
It's just more content for the future, Ben. I think that's what we've got to remember. But we've also got some other really interesting speakers lined up as well, including someone from the legal profession talking to us about some really key legal issues at the moment, which I think everyone should be aware of. And then we've got some other therapists and professionals talking to us about specific conditions, which are quite hot at the moment as well. So there's a lot for listeners to look forward to. Just keep your eyes peeled for episodes as we release them. I think we should also say, Ben, we're going to aim for episode releases on perhaps a monthly basis, if not slightly more frequently than that. We'll have to wait and see.
I guess, if listeners have particular ideas for topics, the frequency or any feedback, that's always helpful. Maybe even a Christmas special, Patrick, with some of the bloopers that have already happened. I'm not sure.
So yeah, we really hope that you, our listeners, are excited about hearing what's to come, but we want you to have some ownership of this as well. So please do feel free to get in touch with us. We're on LinkedIn. We've got an email address, which is listeningfirstpod@gmail.com. We encourage you to contact us and even just offer us some feedback. It would be massively appreciated. But also, yeah, suggestions and ideas for things that you'd like to hear us talk about. That would be fantastic.
And even though I mentioned sort of us having modest or humble ambitions for this, actually we do want it to be a real success. And I think it's probably worth noting as well, Patrick, that we probably are looking for sponsors of the podcast if we can. So people who may want to kind of support the podcast to help it grow, to help it reach, whether that through, marketing or other options, essentially just everything going towards supporting the podcast to grow and get to more people. That's our hope.
Totally, yeah. I mean, it's a learning process for us, isn't it? And we've already learned so much. And one of the things that I've learned is that making podcasts is not free. It costs money because of the software we have to use and everything else that goes along with it. So, we want to make this sustainable and something really useful for our whole community. So, yeah, if you are interested in any kinds of sponsorship opportunities, we're really open to those kinds of discussions. Again, get in touch with us via LinkedIn or listeningfirstpod@gmail.com.
Great. So I think I think that's a really good introduction to where we're at, what we're hoping for, what we sound like. Hopefully this is helpful for potential guests who are contemplating about whether to come on or not, to get a sense of what it's like and what it looks like and what it sounds like. And I'm just really excited, Patrick.
Yeah, me too. And I cannot stress enough that we want this to have the vibe of sitting in a coffee shop or in the pub, just having a chat with people that we trust. It's a safe space to talk about really important, interesting topics. And, ultimately, as professionals or as people with lived experience, we want to get better at what we do, whether that's, supporting people with injuries or whether that's, achieving personal goals. One last thing, Ben, I think we should clarify is that although we were both working within the brain injury and kind of personal injury field, we aren't limiting the discussions on this podcast to our area. This podcast is very broadly aimed at rehabilitation and recovery in the many forms that takes. So, if you're interested in hearing about something else that's rehabilitation and recovery related, but not specifically about brain or spinal injuries or polytrauma, we're really open to having those discussions.
Yeah, and I think we spoke about it really early on, that this isn't about us, it's not about us marketing ourselves, it's about us essentially creating a platform for other people to come and talk about a really important and interesting area. So I think it's probably important for our listeners just that we say that out loud and that there's a recognition of that.
Yeah. So we hope you're as excited as we are about what's to come. Keep your eyes peeled for a couple of episodes which will be available very shortly after the release of this episode, if not immediately afterwards, and for any subsequent episodes after that. if you are listening, if you do listen to our future episodes, we would really appreciate you liking the podcast and offering us a rating, offering us some feedback and sharing with your colleagues and friends and family and anyone else who might be interested in giving us a listen. Please like and follow us on social media as well, particularly on LinkedIn. We may be entering the realms of blue sky at some point as well, but one step at a time. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Excellent. So I've been Ben Marram. Thank you for coming to the Listening First podcast.
And I'm Patrick Boyd. Thanks for being with us as we keep learning, keep sharing, and most importantly, keep listening first.